The failure to act with sufficient ambition to avert the climate catastrophe will be the greatest moral failure of our time.
Making changes takes courage, and if we don't change things, we won't have a future.
I'm an environmentalist. A lot of people don't understand that. I think I know more about the environment than most people.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. Change is coming, whether you like it or not.
Zero Carbon
East Talk. Hello and welcome to Zero Carbonista Series 2, The Manifesto. I'm Ian Collins, and it's a, zero festive welcome, frankly, to our determined journey to leave no stone unturned on the environmental agenda. If it's green, it's on, and we often make the point that politicians should be made to sit down and listen to this on a weekly basis. These are the very issues that are most important on the planet right now. Climate change. Our Westminster masters often appear to miss this very point. The person who's centre to this entire series is, of course, Dale Vince, the accidental businessman, entrepreneur and environmentalist. This is a man who doesn't do things by halves. He built his first windmill back in the mid-90s, and he's the owner of Ecotricity, the world's first green energy company. He also happens to be the chairman of Forest Green Rovers. Morning to you, Dale. Was that a bit Scrooge-like when I said it's a non-festive welcome?
No, that was all right. I didn't even notice, actually. That tells you where I'm coming from. It was all normal to me.
I was thinking of, do we add some sort of jingle bells and, reindeer sound effects on this? And I looked at the agenda and I thought, well, probably not really, because we can't shy away from certain levels of grimness that appear across our desk on these issues on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe it's nice to create a nice, safe, Christmas-free space for people. Listen to this podcast. You won't have fucking jingle bells and all the other kind of trimmings of Christmas. Kind of oppressing you, I would say, because that's how I feel by it. Should we
just have one? Should we have one set of bells and get it over with?
Do you have to?
There it is. It was that you'll never hear it again. Done.
Yeah, Christmas. I mean, it's overdone, isn't it? That's the problem with Christmas, as far as I can see. To me, it is oppressive. So all the expectation of what you should do and where you should go and when you should do it and all that kind of stuff. And Christmas.
Yeah, what a miserable pair of bastards we are.
Oh, I'm a happy person, but I don't like having Christmas imposed on me. As a kid, I used to think, look, I love Christmas, but why can't people be nice to each other all year long?
Yeah, it shouldn't be this 3-day window where but now you can be merry and decent. The rest of the time, be an arse.
Yeah.
But this story has, it's an incredibly sad story to start with. But there is the only thing you can hope out of chronic negative is something positive, and this is the story. The coroner that's made legal history by ruling that air pollution was the cause of the death of a 9-year-old girl, and this was a mother who's been trying for the last 7 years to get this recognised now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very impressive achievement, as you say, coming out of something bad. Little girl called Ella had chronic asthma. I think she was in the hospital 30 times in 3 years. And it's been a real battle to establish air pollution as a cause in a death. And I do find that surprising because, our own government publishes statistics that show that 40,000 people every year in our country die prematurely from airborne pollution. And yet nobody up until now has had that as a cause of death on their death certificate. That is a very strange disconnect, I would say. But that's been put right now, and hopefully it will lead to some further action, because the air pollution levels where they lived, that family, were in breach of legal limits, as much of London is, and many of our cities are in breach of legal limits, and yet the government continues to do nothing about it.
It's interesting that we talked about this on the radio in the week, and I made the point, which I think is a reasonable one, that you haven't actually got to know a lot about the environment. You haven't got to know a lot about pollution. You haven't got to be on board with all environmental arguments and discussions, the kind of stuff we discuss here, to realise that if you live right next to a very busy road where you've got 40,000 trucks and cars going past on a daily basis, and you're a young kid in close proximity to that, on the school run, whenever you go in your garden, any moment of the day, then that's going to have some kind of effect on your health.
Well, yeah, totally. I mean, I I suffer from the pollution that comes out the back end of cars. Just the smell of it. Since I was a kid, I would hold my breath around it because it just feels wrong to be breathing that stuff in. And I remember, maybe 20 years ago, going to London, a very rare thing for me from the sticks, and coming back out with like black bogies, and just thinking, my God, the air in London is absolutely vile.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't stick your lips around an exhaust pipe, would you? I mean, that's essentially what everybody is doing when they're walking, amongst traffic and cycling behind it or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be a half-wit not to see that would cause some kind of damage.
It's part of the madness of modern life. The rate at which we're burning fossil fuels is kind of off the charts, and we seem to have this belief, or maybe we don't really think about it, that the atmosphere is kind of infinite, and when we chuck pollution into it, it just disappears somewhere. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It goes around the world, and it comes back to us. And in some cases, obviously, in cities, it doesn't go anywhere. It just stays at street level. But since I was a kid, I had the same thoughts. What are we doing, chucking all this stuff into the air and thinking it goes away?
Yeah, there's a magic toxin box that sits at the side of every road, and it gets
madness.
neatly packed away at the end of the day and thrown somewhere.
I think what's happened is in the last 10 or 20 years, we've started to bump into the limits of everything. And so that magical thinking has been kind of, disabused. We talked about peak oil, in the last 20 years, for example, and, we can see peak copper and, I think maybe one day peak oxygen, but we can also see the limits of the environment to absorb the impacts that we're putting on it. And of course, climate change is the biggest example of that. We're absolutely changing the climate of the planet.
Yeah, spot on. Here's a question from Chris on Twitter. What does Christmas look like for you, Dale? Do you have what? Chris, go away. What's
I'm
going
happy
on?
to talk about it. I don't mind. Listen, Christmas every year.
Don't make us play the bells again.
No, don't do the bells. You know what it's like after Christmas. Everybody says to everybody, "Oh, how was your Christmas? How was your Christmas?" It's like it's what you get asked a dozen times first day back to work or something. And the comment I always reply with, which I don't think about, is genuine from me, is, "Oh, I survived it, and that's how I feel about Christmas. I just survived it."
Yeah, that's fair enough. I guess it's reasonable to ask then, as a lifelong vegan, what do you have for Christmas dinner?
Yeah, well, usually it's like a roast dinner with, way too much food, all kinds of vegetables, just a mountain of those, some kind of vegan gravy, obviously, and probably some kind of nut roast or something like that. So it's like a Christmas dinner, but just without the murder in the middle of the plate. No punches pulled here today.
Not messing around on this one, are you, now? No. Let's turn to this. World leaders under the spotlight again. The UN Secretary General has called on all countries to declare a climate emergency or face catastrophic results. It shouldn't be. It has to be reiterated, doesn't it? It seems every couple of months. Dozens of world leaders spoke at the virtual Climate Ambition Summit on Saturday. Some of the smallest nations worst hit by climate to the world's worst polluters. But the headline comes out the same. More needs to be done. We need to declare the emergency.
Yeah, and you're right. It seems to be something that shouldn't need to be repeated, but it is repeatedly repeated. We're in that final decade, according to the UN and according to climate science, when we have our last chance to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. The temperature of the Earth exceeding 2 degrees. Which is thought to be the upper threshold of, disaster. And yet we have to keep reminding ourselves and saying, what we need to do more, we need to do more. But it's sadly just the world we live in, isn't it? Our own government brought out the 10 pointless plan a couple of weeks ago and then got about business as usual, spending billions on bad things, roads. The third runway for Heathrow decision was overturned in the Supreme Court this week.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that, but
yeah, I did. Yeah,
it had been declared illegal, the planning consent, and now the Supreme Court have declared that ruling illegal, and the planning is back on. But it remains to be seen, I think, whether Heathrow's third runway will ever be built. I think it really is, kind of running into headwinds, that project, not least from the virus, but also from the climate crisis and the fact that we just have to stop doing what we used to do. We really have to change how we live.
We had a fella on on the radio this week from the managing director of Nuclear Power, spokesperson, and I couldn't resist dropping your name into the
you.
mix. Well, it was a useful education. We've done this for over a year now, and so I was able to say to him, "You don't need to do any of this." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, we have enough wind power to make all of this stuff happen." And I said, "You'll be familiar with Dale Vince," and he said, I have absolute utmost respect for Dale. He was
Nice.
very nice, and his argument, because we've talked about nuclear power before. Of course, there's now plans afoot for another big station, and his point was that you need both. Yes, you need the windmills, but you also need a solid power base in case the wind drops. That was essentially his argument.
Yeah, and I think I heard that a few days ago, and it made me chuckle because it reminded me that when you talk about food, for example, another one of the three big areas of life that we have to change, quite often what you get back from farmers and a kind of animal eating lobby will be an acknowledgement. Yes, of course, we need to eat more plants, but we need a balanced diet, which is basically just a way of saying, look, but we have to carry on doing this. We give a nod to what you're saying, but we need some of this, surely. Truth is, when it comes to eating meat or nuclear power, we don't need any of it. And the idea of this solid base load is kind of old-fashioned. The way the grid runs at the moment, it is built up of base load, and then there are generators that come in and out relatively quickly to meet the peaks of demand. But the smart grid, the one that's coming to replace that, doesn't need baseload like that at all, because we're modifying demand as not just modifying generation to meet demand, but modifying demand to meet generation, which is a very different concept. So it's old-fashioned to say that we need baseload. The thing about nuclear is not a lot of people know that it's inflexible. So renewable energy is driven by the weather and depends on it. Gas can be flexed up and down relatively quickly. Nuclear power can't flex. It has to run at a flat line. And which is a different problem, particularly for a modern smart grid.
We need you and this. I can't remember the guy's name. He was a nice fella. We need you both on, I think, together to chat this one over.
Yeah, I'd be happy to have a chat about that. Because I think we need a constructive debate about it. And I understand that people in the industry are going to argue their corner. But at the same time, we're going to do what's right for the country. And nuclear energy is super expensive. And obviously the waste is toxic for thousands of years. And we don't have an answer for how to dispose of that. And that price is not factored into the cost of the energy that is already super expensive.
Let's have a listen to everybody's favourite politician.
I think it's a real scandal that UNICEF should be playing politics in this way, when it is meant to be looking after people in the poorest, the most deprived countries in the world, where people are starving, where there are famines and where there are civil wars, and they make cheap political points of this kind, giving, I think, £25,000 to one council. It is a political stunt of the lowest order.
So this is the leader of the House of Commons, Jacob Rees-Mogg. He's accused UNICEF of playing politics after the charity launched a campaign to help feed kids in the UK. The Tory MP said the charity was meant to look after people in the poorest country, and they should be ashamed. He was quite forthright on that as well.
Yeah, he was.
This wasn't a slip of the tongue. This was an absolute determined proclamation on his views on what UNICEF are doing. What do you make of that?
Well, I thought two things. I thought it was the classic knee-jerk reaction of failing states all around the world when the UN has to intervene to save their own people, and that's what's happening here. And I thought at the same time, this man has no sense of irony. He's referred to as the member for the 18th century for the way he dresses and thinks. If anybody's ever played politics, it's Jacob Rees-Mogg. To accuse UNICEF of that is, the ultimate irony, I think. And as I think some Labour politicians said in response, it's the UK government that should be ashamed. Because we are one of the richest countries in the world, and we have a problem with poor families and kids getting enough to eat. People are starving in this country. Something like 4 million people are in food poverty. That's a disgrace. It's us that should be ashamed, that UNICEF have to step in.
It's just for me, the other thing I take from this, it's just how somebody can, despite, whatever, his background and what we think of him, you'd think that, a lot of politicians are skilled operators. They know the mood. They can work out how something's going to play out, what the optics are going to look like. And to be so unself-aware that here is a very opulent, aristocratic man proclaiming his opinions on a children's charity helping hungry kids in the UK. It's just not a good look. And he could have deferred that in a number of ways and said, I'll look at, even if he thought that there was politics or something not quite as it seems, to say it in those kind of terms, it's just spectacularly misses any sense of what the average person might think of him and would think of him now.
I get that. I think also it's worth thinking about what alternative does he have, or does this government have? I mean, they have this problem challenging the existence, the massive rise of food banks, the use of them, and the rise of food poverty. They have a problem with that. How do they respond to it? They can't own it. They can't say, yeah, that's us. Sorry, guys, we'll do something about it. I don't know what alternative people like Rees-Mogg have other than to just attack it, to claim that it's playing politics, that it's not real, that the people put themselves in that position themselves, whatever it is. What alternative do they have but to attack it? Because they caused it and they won't solve it.
Here's a couple of questions. Jerry says, season's he's at season's greetings to you both. Dale, have you drawn your diamond ticket draw yet?
No, we haven't, Jerry. And I don't mind season's greetings. That's not too bad. There were no jingles in there, and no Merry Xmas's. Oh, I don't mind Xmas actually. I've been doing a lot of book dedications, writing Xmas when people are asking for Christmas. One thing is it saves me time. There's a lot of letters in Christmas, and the other thing is I'm kind of a little bit opposed to the idea of being Christmas, because actually it's a pagan festival that's been repurposed by Christianity. Back in the day, so,
they nicked it.
They nicked it, yeah. But, no harm. Because the 21st, of course, which is soon, I think it's in a few more days, is the shortest day of the year. And that's, kind of midwinter. And the pagans had a festival around about then to celebrate that. And you can imagine that's like an important event.
It's quite depressing, though, because it means it's starting to get light again, isn't it? Technically.
That's a good thing. That's not depressing, surely. That's a good thing. No,
we want darkness to start at about 2:30 in the afternoon and go on till about 8 in the morning, don't we?
Do we? Yeah, that's a strange. I didn't know.
I know. Everyone says I should live in Norway or something, northern Norway.
Yeah, maybe you should.
But the dark nights are pretty good, though, aren't they? I mean, not in the summer. In the summer, I want sunshine till 10 at night.
Till 10,
in the winter, when it's crisp and chilly and dark, isn't that nice?
Well, I like it all, but I like it when it changes from one to the other. I wouldn't want to be stuck with one. What was Jerry's question? We might have missed that.
Oh, he said I did hit. Oh, here it is. There it is. The Book Bugle. Slightly late from the technical team there. The Book Bugle.
You need a Christmas version of the Book Bugle, really. But,
hang on.
I'm not going to ask for it. No, I don't want it. Don't do it.
They've done it. Look, there it is. It's a Book Bugle with bells. What he said was, have you drawn your diamond ticket draw yet? Can you just explain what that is for those who don't know, whether you've done it?
Yeah, no, I thought it was an important question that we almost missed there. So we've got this competition, Willy Wonka style, going on. We've got 10 diamond tickets hidden virtually amongst copies of Manifesto. And the closing date to buy a book and qualify for the draw is the end of December. And the draw itself takes place in early January. So no, Jerry, not done yet. There's still... 10 days left or something like that.
Perfect. Here's one from Sam. Love the podcast. How do I get my business idea in front of you and your team, says Sam. It's a good question.
Oh, well, look, you can send me an email. You could guess my email address, but I'll tell you anyway. It's dale.vince@ecotricity.co.uk. Ping us an email and I'll stick it in front of the team.
Do you get many of those?
Yeah, quite a few. Yeah, we were thinking of running some kind of Green Dragon's Den, kind of filming it and making a little bit of, bit of fun out of it, really, I suppose. But it happens all of the time, and we spend some time every week looking at people's ideas and talking to people, and seeing how we can help with advice and stuff, and what we might get involved in. It's kind of like a green version of Dragon's Den without the focus on money above everything else, which I think is the only gross part of that show.
Would you do it? Would you go on it?
I would, yeah, I would. And I did a screen test for it once a few years ago, actually.
I think you mentioned that, yeah.
And I would, because I would go on there as myself, and money would not be my focus, and I wouldn't be interested in anybody's idea that didn't have an environment outcome. And probably that's why they didn't choose me in the end. I don't know. Too radical.
This question, final one, comes from Alex on Twitter. What happened to Extinction Rebellion? Do you know, somebody emailed me that very same question this week as well. It's not a bad question because the profile seems to have disappeared unless they're cooking up plans ready to explode back onto the scene in 2021?
Yeah, they probably are. I think they wax and wane, as like a lot of things do. I don't think they've gone anywhere. But I don't know. I'm not privileged to any inside knowledge. And I was saying the other day, I was just talking about it yesterday, actually, it's a very interesting movement, XR, because nobody owns it. It doesn't belong to the people that founded it. We were talking about the founder and a conversation I'd had with her around climate change and how she thought we could carry on eating meat and how staggered I was by that. This is in the context of the book and that. And I was saying, but her views that they aren't in control of XR. XR is like an open source protest movement. It's been released out there, and there's an animal rebellion, there's a wildlife rebellion, there's a business rebellion. People are making their own versions of XR and their own interpretations of what XR is, and just getting on with it, which is a really interesting phenomena.
Do you think you've been involved in campaigning and the like for many, many years? I mean, do you think they are game changing? Do you think this is the organ, as you say, it's a kind of an umbrella organization, different individuals, people from different backgrounds? You have conservatives that are part of it, all manner of people. Is it game changing, or is it, will it turn out in years to come and go, oh, do you remember that phase when this group called Extinction Rebellion were there?
No, I hear Rees-Mogg is secretly a member, actually.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah,
Will we see Jacob Rees-Mogg gluing his testicles to a police car? That's what I know.
Oh, I love that. But look, I think they've already changed the game, XR. Because they've engaged a massive audience. They've made a lot of people aware about this. They've given them an outlet, a channel for this kind of concern that they have, and in particular, what they've changed is with the tactic of mass disobedience. They don't protest. They get in the way of stuff. They hold up normal life. They disrupt. And they keep doing that. And they say openly, we're going to do that. And we are happy to be arrested, in fact, because that clogs up the police stations as well. And again, just disrupts stuff. And I think it's a brilliant, beautiful approach. It's totally non-violent. But it says protesting's not enough. Chanting slogans and walking down the street's not enough. Let's get in the way of normal life, just to make a point, actually, that normal life is killing us, and we have to change it.
And that is it for this episode, Dale. I was going to say happy,
happy,
word.
what? Yeah, happy solstice. Let's go for that. That's what hippies say that to each other. Happy solstice. Yeah.
Happy solstice. And what I like about this is that where everybody else might be sitting on a sofa for the next week, stuffing all manner of things into their festive mushes. We're going to be back with another podcast in between Christmas and New Year.
Oh yes, we are, aren't we?
Yeah, I think on the 30. I think it's a New Year's Eve release.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah,
I'll be there.
We look forward to it. Dale, we'll speak then.
Cheers, Ian.
And that's it for this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, absolutely free, of course, from your preferred podcast provider so that you get each new episode automatically. Do leave a review there too. And if you want to get in touch, you can email your comments and questions to zerocarbonista@ecotricity.co.uk. Really important bit, of course, do follow Dale on social media. That's twitter.com/Dale Vince or facebook.com/Dale Vince.
And now on Instagram.
Zero Carbon
East of